outdistanced all other Marxist movements in the race for power because of its tight collective organization. The National Socialist movement, too, won out over all the other focus movements which proliferated in the 1920s because of Hitler's early recognition that a rising mass movement can never go too far in advancing and promoting collective cohesion. He knew that the chief passion of the frustrated is to belong, and that there cannot be too much cementing and binding to satisfy this passion. 35. The milieu most favorable for the rise of propagation of mass movements is one in which a once compact corporate structure is, for one reason or another, in a state of disintegration. The age in which Christianity rose and spread was one when large numbers of men were uprooted. The compact city-states had been partially merged into one vast empire, and the old social and political groupings had been weakened or dissolved. Christianity made its greatest headway in the large cities where lived thousands of decarinated individuals, some of them slaves, some freemen, and some merchants, who had been separated by force or voluntary from their hereditary milieu. In the countryside, where the communal pattern was least disturbed, the new religion found the ground less favorable. The villagers, pagani, and the heath-dwellers, the heathen, clung longest to the ancient cults. A somewhat similar situation is to be observed in the rise of nationalist and socialist movements in the second half of the 19th century. The extraordinary mobility and urbanization of population served to create during those decades an extraordinary number of persons uprooted from ancestral soil and local allegiance. Experiencing a grave economic insecurity and psychological maladjustment, these were very susceptible to demagogic propaganda, socialist or nationalist, or both. The general rule seems to be that as one pattern of corporate cohesion weakens, conditions become ripe for the rise of a mass movement and the eventual establishment of a new, more vigorous form of compact unity. When a church which was well embracing relaxed its hold, new religious movements are likely to crystallize. H.G. Wells remarked at the time that the Reformation people objected not to the church's power, but to its weakness. Their movements against the church within it and without were movements not for release from a religious control, but for a fuller and more abundant religious control. If the religious mood is undermined by enlightenment, the rising movements will be socialist, nationalist, or racist. The French Revolution, which was also a nationalist movement, came as a reaction not against the vigorous tyranny of the Catholic Church and the ancient regime, but against their weakness and ineffectuality. When people revolt in a totalitarian society, they rise not against the wickedness of the regime, but its weakness. Where the corporate pattern is strong, it is difficult for a mass movement to find a footing. The communal compactness of the Jews, both in Palestine and the diaspora, were probably one of the reasons that Christianity made so little headway among them. The destruction of the temple caused, if anything, a tightening of the communal bonds. The synagogue and the congregation received now much of the devotion which formerly flowed toward the temple in Jerusalem. Later, when the Christian Church had the power to segregate the Jews in ghettos, it gave their communal compactness an additional reinforcement, and thus unintentionally ensured the survival of Judaism intact through the ages. The coming of enlightenment undermined both orthodoxy and ghetto walls. Suddenly, and perhaps for the first time since the days of Job and Alexius, the Jew found himself an individual, terribly alone in a hostile world. There was no collective body he could blend with and lose himself in. The synagogue and the congregation become shriveled, lifeless things. While the traditions and prejudices of 2,000 years prevented his complete integration with the Gentile corporate bodies, thus the modern Jew became the most autonomous of individuals, and inevitably, too, the most frustrated. It is not surprising, therefore, that the mass movement of modern times often found in him a ready convert. The Jew also crowded the roads, leading to palliatives of frustration such as hustling and migration. He also threw himself into passionate effort to prove his individual worth by material achievements and creative work. There was, it is true, one speck of corporateness he could create around himself by his own efforts, namely the family, and he made the most of it. But in the case of the European Jew, Hitler chewed and scorched his only refuge in concentration camps and gas chambers. Thus now, more than ever before, the Jew, particularly in Europe, is the ideal potential convert, and it almost seems providential that Zionism should be on hand in the Jew's darkest hour to enfold him in its corporate embrace and cure him of his individual isolation. Israel is indeed a rare refuge. It is home and family, synagogue and congregation, nation and revolution, a partly all in one. The recent history of Germany also furnishes an interesting example of the relation between corporate compactness and respectively to the appeal of mass movements. There was no likelihood of a genuine revolutionary movements arising in Wilhelm Germany. The Germans were satisfied with the centralized authoritarian Kaiser regime, and even defeat in the First World War did not impair their love for it. The revolution of 1918 was an artificial thing with little popular backing. The years of the Weimar Constitution were for most Germans a time of irritation and frustration. Used as they were to commands from above and respect for authority, they found the loose, irrelevant democratic order all confusion and chaos. They were shocked to realize that they had to participate in government, choose a party, and pass judgment upon political matters. They longed for a new corporate whole, more monolithic, all-embracing and glorious to behold than even the Kaiser regime had been, and the Third Reich more than answered their prayers. Hitler's totalitarian regime, once established, was never in danger of mass revolt. So long as the ruling Nazi hierarchy was willing to shoulder all responsibilities and make all decisions, there was not the least chance of any popular antagonism to arise. The danger point could have been reached had Nazi discipline and its totalitarian control been relaxed. What de Tocqueville says of a tyrannical government is true of all totalitarian orders. Their moment of greatest danger is when they begin to reform, that is to say, when they begin to show liberal tendencies. Another and final illustration of the thesis that effective collective bodies are immune to the appeal of mass movements, but that a crumbling collective pattern is the most favorable milieu for their rise, is found in the relation between the collective body we know as an army and mass movements. There is hardly an instance of an intact army giving rise to a religious, revolutionary, or nationalist movement. On the other hand, a disintegrating army, whether by the orderly process of demobilization or by desertion due to demoralization, is fertile ground for a proselytizing movement. The man just out of the army is an ideal potential convert, and we find him among the early adherents of all contemporary mass movements. He feels alone and lost in the free-for-all of civilian life. The responsibilities and uncertainties of an autonomous existence weigh and prey upon him. He longs for certitude, camaraderie, freedom from individual responsibility, and a vision of something altogether different from the competitive free society around him. He finds all this in the brotherhood and the revivalist atmosphere of a rising movement. Misfits. 36. The frustration of the misfit can vary in intensity. There are first the temporary misfits, people who have not found their place in life but still hope to find it. Adolescent youth, unemployed college graduates, veterans, new immigrants, and the likes are of this category. They are restless, dissatisfied, and haunted by the fear that their best years will be wasted before they reach their goal. They are receptive to the preaching of a proselytizing movement, and yet do not always make a staunch convert, for they are not irreconcilably estranged from their self. They do not see it as irredeemably spoiled. It is easy for them to conceive an autonomous existence that is purposeful and hopeful. The slightest evidence of progress and success reconciles them with the world and themselves. The role of veterans in the rise of mass movements has been touched upon in Section 35. A prolonged war by national armies is likely to be followed by a period of social unrest for victors and vanquished alike. The reason is neither the unleashing of passions and the taste of violence during wartime, nor the loss of faith in a social order that could not prevent so enormous and meaningless a waste of life and wealth. It is rather due to the prolonged break in the civilian routine of the millions enrolled in the national armies. The returning soldiers find it difficult to recapture the rhythm of their pre-war lives. The readjustment to peace and home is slow and painful, and the country is flooded with temporary misfits. Thus it seems that the passage from war to peace is more critical for an established order than the passage from peace to war. 37. The permanent misfits are those who, because of a lack of talent or some irreparable defect in body or mind, cannot do the one thing for which their whole being craves. No achievement, however spectacular in other fields, can give them a sense of fulfillment. Whatever they undertake becomes a passionate pursuit, but they never arrive, never pause. They demonstrate the fact that we can never have enough of which we really do not want, and that we run fastest and furthest when we run from ourselves. The permanent misfits can find salvation only in complete separation from the self, and they usually find it by losing themselves in the compact collectivity of a mass movement. By renouncing individual will, judgment, and ambition, and dedicating all their powers to the service of an eternal cause, they are at least lifted off the endless treadmill which can never lead them to fulfillment. The most incurably frustrated, and therefore the most venomous among the permanent misfits, are those with an unfulfilled craving for creative work. Both those who try to write, paint, compose, etc., and fail decisively, and those who, after tasting the elation of creativeness, feel it drying up with the creative flow within, and know that never again will they produce aught worthwhile, are alike in the grip of the desperate passion. Neither fame, nor power, nor riches, nor even monumental achievements in other fields can still their hunger. Even the wholehearted dedication to a holy cause does not always cure them. Their unappeased hunger persists, and they are likely to become the most violent extremists in the service of their holy cause. The inordinately selfish. Number 38. The inordinately selfish are particularly susceptible to frustration. The more selfish a person, the more poignant his disappointments. It is the inordinately selfish, therefore, who are likely to be the most persuasive champions of selfishness, or of selflessness. The fiercest fanatics are often selfish people who are forced by innate shortcomings or external circumstances to lose faith in their own selves. They separate the excellent instrument of their selflessness from their ineffectual selves and attach it to the service of some holy cause. and through it be faith of love and humility they adopt, they can be neither loving nor humble. The ambitious facing unlimited opportunities. Number 39. Unlimited opportunities can be as potent a cause for frustration as a procrastinate or lack of opportunities. When opportunities are apparently unlimited, there is an inevitable depreciation of the present. The attitude is, all that I am doing or possibly can do is chicken feed compared with what is left undone. Such is the frustration which broods over gold camps and haunts taut minds in boom times. Hence the remarkable fact that, joined with the ruthlessness self-seeking which seems to be the mainspring of gold hunters, land grabbers, and other get-rich-quick enthusiasts, there is an excessive readiness for self-sacrifice and united action. Patriotism, racial solidarity, and even preaching of revolution find a more ready response among people who see limitless opportunities spread out before them than among those who move within the fixed limits of a familiar, orderly, and predictable pattern of existence. Minorities. A minority is in a precocious position, however protected it be by law or force. The frustration engendered by the unavoidable sense of insecurity is less intense in a minority intent on preserving its identity than in one bent upon dissolving in and blending with the majority. A minority which preserves its identity is inevitably a compact whole which shelters the individual, gives him a sense of belonging, and immunizes him against frustration. On the other hand, in a minority bent on assimilation, the individual stands alone, pitted against prejudice and discrimination. He is also burdened with the sense of guilt, or vague, of a renegade. The Orthodox Jew is less frustrated than the emancipated Jew. The segregated Negro in the South is less frustrated than the non-segregated Negro in the North. Again, within a minority bent on assimilation, the last and most successful economically and culturally are likely to be most frustrated than those in between. The man who fails sees himself as an outsider, and in the case of a member of a minority group who wants to blend with the majority, failure intensifies the feeling of not belonging. A similar feeling crops up at the other end of the economical cultural scale. Those of a minority who attain fortune and fame often find it difficult to gain entrance into the exclusive circles of the majority. They are thus made conscious of their foreignness. Furthermore, having evidence of their individual superiority, they resent the admission of inferiority implied in the process of assimilation. Thus, it is to be expected that the least and most successful of a minority bent on assimilation should be the most responsive to the appeal of a proselytizing mass movement. The least and most successful among the Italian Americans were the most ardent admirers of Mussolini's revolution. The least and most successful among the Irish Americans were the most responsive to the Voyageurs' call. The least and most successful among the Jews are the most responsive to Zionism. The least and most successful among the blacks are the most race-conscious. The Board. Number 41. There is perhaps no more reliable indicator of society's ripeness for a mass movement than the prevalence of unrelieved boredom. In almost all the descriptions of the periods preceding the rise of mass movements, there is reference to a vast ennui, E-N-N-U-I. And in their earliest stages, mass movements are more likely to find sympathizers and support among the bored than among the exploited and the oppressed. To a deliberate fomenter of mass upheavals, the report that people are bored stiff should be at least as encouraging as they are suffering from intolerable economic or political abuses. When people are bored, it is primarily with their own selves that they are bored. Consciousness of a barren, meaningless existence in the main fountainhead of boredom. People who are not conscious of their individual separateness, as in the case with those who are members of a compact tribe, church, party, etc., are not accessible to boredom. The differentiated individual is free of boredom only when he is engaged either in creative work or some absorbing occupation, or when he is wholly engrossed in the struggle for existence. Pleasure chasing and dissipation are ineffective palliatives. Where people live autonomous lives and are not badly off, yet are without abilities or opportunities for creative work or useful action, there is no telling to what desperate and fantastic shifts they might resort in order to give meaning and purpose to their lives. Boredom amounts for the almost invariable presence of spinsters and middle-aged women in the birth of mass movements. Even in the case of Islam and the Nazi movement, which frowned upon feminine activity outside the home, we find women of a certain type playing an important role in the early stage of their development. Marriage has for women many equivalents of joining a mass movement. It offers them a new purpose in life, a new future, a new identity, a new name. The boredom of spinsters and of women who can no longer find joy and fulfillment in marriage stems from the awareness of a barren, spoiled life. By embracing a holy cause and dedication their energies and substance to its advancement, they find a new life full of purpose and meaning. Hitler made use of the society ladies thirsting for adventure, sick of their empty lives, no longer getting a kick out of love affairs. He was financed by the wives of some of the great industrialists long before their husbands had heard of him. Mayim Beard tells of a similar role played by bored wives of businessmen before the French Revolution. They were devastated with the boredom and given to fists of the vapors. Relentlessly, they applauded innovators. The Sinners, number 42. Sir Donald remarked that patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrels has also a less derogatory